Hello, my name is John Gass. I'm with PK Harris Advisors. We're the asset manager for the Park Harrisburg parking system. And I'd like to welcome everybody to the second public meeting of the Park Harrisburg Advisory Committee. One point I'd like to make, I'm sorry if there was any confusion on the date of the meeting. I recognize that some people showed up on Sunday night. I will take the blame for that in some of my communications. Trying to help the press understand some of the points. I guess I got into frequent email communications and somehow the date became Sunday, so that is my fault and I apologize for that. Regardless, here we are. 2014 was a great year for the system. Went through significant changes, went through a number of challenges for the system in getting set up. We recognize as going through the year that there were a number of issues that many of you identified, and that's why we're here tonight, is to discuss those. We tried to do some preliminary work in framing these issues and looking at potential solutions. We'd like to follow up with announcements in the next 2 weeks on how we can take care of some of these issues and continue to improve the operation of the system. We know that many of you, through emails and other ways of communication, have very strong opinions on some of the matters affecting the parking system. We'd like to ask you to try and help us in problem identification tonight versus any significant venting. We think that that will be productive, so we appreciate your help with that. I'd like to start first in the meeting by letting each of the committee members identify themselves. James, if you could start us off, and we'll work around the curve.
I'm James Henning. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Administration for the Department of General Services with the State of Pennsylvania.
I'm Jeff Durno. I work for Assured Guarantee.
I'm Chris Sherman with SB Plus.
I'm Laura Collison with Dauphin County.
David Black, Harrisburg Regional Chief Recruiting, also representing PEDPA.
Rick West on the Trimont Asset Management Team.
Bruce Weber, City of Harrisburg. Thank you all for coming out.
Wanda Miles, President of Harrisburg City Council.
Richard Constance with Park Committee.
I'm Nancy Stein. I'm not on the advisory committee board, but I'm the senior manager here for Park Harrisburg.
I'm John Camp with SB Plus, regional manager for City Harrisburg.
So if you'll look to the sides, we put up the general agenda for tonight, and we'll run first through some project status bullet points. I'm going to talk very shortly and generally to the financial reports, not really speak to a large degree on the data. We will issue 2014 actual results and 2015 budget later this week. But I find that sometimes when you combine assessing numbers and trying to assess issues, that it's better just to focus on issues tonight. We want to talk about how the system benefits the city. Steve Goldfield, who we all know, is going to help us understand that. We have been taking questions by email, and we're going to discuss generally what some of those questions have been and how we're going to address some of those and how we're going to deal with input from the public going forward. Also discuss more items dealing with meters and pay by phone, have additional comments by the committee members, and then allow open session for the public to come up and comment. So looking at our 2014 accomplishments, after post-closing transition, SB Plus, PK Harris took over at very short notice for this transaction. Basically, we had to begin from scratch in forming up new personnel, new systems, especially in the area of meters and enforcement. And we took that over from the city as opposed to the Harrisburg Parking Authority. We have within the garage and meter system in 2014 over 3 million parkers. On the operations side, we had new staff, new processes, procedures, new meter administration, added the use of Pango that will allow the acquisition of meter time before you park, and then also added the digital meter system, which enabled us to basically have an easier way to pay. John Kemp has some data points on those particular items.
Right, so when we started, this was obviously a coin-operated system, meaning all cash, and before the year concluded, we're at a point now where 81% of the transactions occur with a credit card. And as John mentioned, the pay-by-phone option was added very late in the year in 2014. By the end of the year, the amount of market share there grew all the way to 4%, which is pretty significant. So we've seen a substantial shift in the use of technology here. We've also, and as John mentioned, with the digital multi-space meters, all told, in Central Business District, as well as through Midtown, we've got 168 multi-space meters now fully implemented on the company. We also have some new parking technology coming online. We're able to go through the RFP process and source all new equipment for the garages. That's all the off-street and 2 service lots. So that's all of the off-street facilities. All of the contract I's have been dotted and T's crossed, so that equipment will be coming within weeks, beginning within a few weeks. So garage by garage, we'll be installing new equipment, and very much looking forward to all the benefits there.
Difficult to hear back here.
Okay, so aside from the 168 multi-space meters, which by now most of you I'm sure you're familiar with, we've got new technology coming beginning in the next several weeks for the garages and lots. So for all of the off-street parking, we'll be new parking equipment, new technology, and that's one thing we're really looking forward to. Prior to that, I mentioned we transitioned quickly within a year from an all-cash system for paying parking on the street to a system now where 81% of the transactions are done by credit card and 4% of the transactions are done via phone. So,
Thank you, John. Covered some of the points that I was going to cover next. So Nancy, I will skip to you to discuss outreach and event parking for 2014.
Sure. The House of Worship programs are being used at 4.
Can you make sure you use the mic?
Okay. We currently have four churches that are involved in the House of Worship programs, and that is being really received in a positive way. We also are offering special events for the weddings, which is also being used frequently. Park Harrisburg has supported local organizations and events on many occasions. We have created 4 new programs at the River Street Parking Garage that supports employees and residents to work and live downtown. And this has been received with very high usage, and the program, one of the programs average over 1,000 transactions per month. We also are offering 90 validations throughout our system for the convenience to the local businesses. And anecdotally, some businesses have contacted me to say, hey, thanks, Park Harrisburg. My patrons can park on the street near their business, and they are pleased about that.
Thanks, Nancy. Just some general bullet points on the 2014 year-end financials. Looking at the significant rate changes, new meters installed, and the new standards for enforcement, we were able to see good increases in revenues as compared to operations by Harrisburg Parking Authority. However, we did not live up to our projections on the budget. We were able to work with SP Plus and moderate our expenses, so we basically ended up with a 0 bottom line. So we ended up with a balanced cash flow, more or less, for the year. One item that has been questioned is how are we paying for capital improvements? At closing, when the bonds were funded in December of 2013, there was $9 million of the bond amount that was funded into the capital improvement reserve, and that we've been using to pay for the installation, acquisition of the meter system, and then also will use for the payment of the installation of automated entrances and exits. So we feel fortunate to have those monies on hand. It allows us to continue to keep the system in good operating basis. Moving on to the 2015 outlook, what we'd like to label 2015 for is continued improvement. We basically put the building blocks for the system in place in 2014. We look to 2015 to polish the system, to try to minimize any of the errors that have been brought up recently or in 2014 to the extent possible. We will see rate increases in 2015 for transient and monthlies. We will have no increases on the meters. We will also see no increase in the enforcement revenues. Operating expenses have increased moderately. Capital improvements, we mentioned we're going to install new automated entrances and exits this year, and then also are looking at approximately $3 million of capital improvements. It includes deferrals of some amounts that we had budgeted for last year, but felt it was better to put into this year so that we could look at the best contracting method possible in an effort to try to gather as much savings as possible. Rick West is going to address some attributes for enhancements in 2015.
Thank you, John. So one of the things in putting the new technology in is we have the opportunity to get the data of really understanding different user groups and day parts and day of week. And so we've had the opportunity to start in the old equipment system, like in the off-street garages, really drill down on River Street. With the new equipment system going in, we'll be able to drill down more easily everywhere. And that's allowing us to help understand what new programs we can develop and offer to serve everyone better. So one of the items for 2015 is we're doing an integration of the on-street meter system and the off-street new equipment that's going in. That's going to allow us to have a validation program, which is still to be determined. Some of the features of that will be the integration not yet done or completed, is to be able to have a validation program that could be used on or off street. So that's something we actually were only able to identify more recently, that integration could take place this year. We're excited about that. Because traditionally, as I say in the slide, it's, traditionally most validation was just off street, and if it was on street, being prepay versus post-pay, a little hard to do, having a good consistency there. In addition, one of the things we've seen in cities with on and off street operations, but on the on street meters, is oftentimes the meters are put in, and they're put in with the old mechanical meters, which are the coin-only meters, with time limits and designated based upon 20 years ago or 30 years ago, kind of what were the businesses and uses in that area of the city. And some of those uses are changing. So one of the things we're able to do with the data is to start understanding, where the parking is underutilized because it doesn't quite match up with that need. So one of the things we're doing in 2015 is we're going to be identifying, where there's more on-street short-term hourly space in a neighborhood that doesn't have sufficient demand, doesn't need that much. So within a few months on the Park Harrisburg website, we will be posting our first neighborhoods that we've analyzed to identify that, hey, we have extra surplus parking here. We're looking for ideas from businesses and residents of how to utilize it. And we have a new email that we've set up for a couple purposes, but one purpose is if you are a business, an organization, a resident, and you want to inquire about parking in your area and how you'd like to use that or rent that, then let us know and we'll take a look at it. The big thing is meant to be a revenue neutral. It's just meant to be get better utilization out of the system, better service everybody. So one of the things that's already been socialized in Harrisburg that also we wanted to just highlight tonight as well is the fact that one of the things that is going on around the country, it's happening more and more, but it's still emerging, is what's called parklets. And parklets can be seasonal or can be year-round. Obviously, you wouldn't want to sit outside in the winter. Versus this picture is of LA, so it's a different place. But it's a concept that's great to really take a look. Once again, sometimes it's where space is underutilized. Sometimes it's where it's meant to help a business grow. On the next page is really just some other examples, because sometimes it's done more as social gathering places, not necessarily affiliated to a business, maybe something more within a neighborhood. Once again, sometimes these are seasonal, sometimes they're not. This is more of a city program that would be rolled out, where in partnership with the parking, and there are a lot of things that it's not as simple as it sounds, but the kinks have been worked out in other cities and other towns, and it's something that we wanted to get people thinking about. And if you, once again, parkharrisburg@spplus.com or email if you have an idea. Specific to off-street parking, one of the things we all are aware of is when the garages, because they're staffed with cashiers, and so therefore in many of the garages, most of the garages, the evening is very quiet, the night's very quiet, so the garage is closed. So someone coming back to the garage after it's closed has to call the number, a supervisor come to allow people to get out. And one of the benefits of the new parking technology is going to be that won't be required. So anyone can go back, if you park in the garage. Monthlies have always been able to do it, and now transients with tickets, and we'll always be able to get back. And out the garage, it'll also allow us to actually look at just extending the hours of many of these garages as well. And so that'll be a great new opportunity. Continuing on the off-street, one of the programs we wanted to look at this year and actually get a community committee together to partner on this with us. As John said, between the on-street and the off-street, we have 3 million parking sessions. So parking sessions, essentially people coming in, people going. So those are eyeballs in the garages and in the lots. And there's a lot of opportunity for local organizations or businesses to promote themselves. And that we're not looking at this as a revenue item. This is just meant to be something that if we want to do this as a community, we need to set some standards on how we're going to do it, making sure it's open access to any organization, any business that wants to take a look at it, and start understanding what people's desire is to do this, so that we can put a program together to allow businesses to promote themselves, including ideally not just static as in here's who we are and where we are, but trying to do something that we'll have to talk about how a business can be more promotional. So something that they're promoting specific to that week, by example. So once again, if you have an interest in participating in the committee, or just want to say you have an interest in promoting your business in one of the parking locations, please just email us at Park Harrisburg. Now I'll hand it back to John for the financial report.
Thanks, Rick. Now we're going to move to some question and answer topics. We had issued several weeks ago, both on the Park Harrisburg website and through the press, an email that members of the public and the press could send questions ahead of the meeting. We had listed, I believe, about 30 questions, and many of these had common topics. But we think that this is going to be a good way moving forward for people to ask questions, so we're going to preserve this. Unfortunately, we are going to change the email address, but we will post that on the website so that people can use that going forward. We also like to thank the press. We have established a policy that we respond to questions from the press in writing. And one of the reasons for this, and the primary reason for this is a very complicated transaction. As you can look at the table here and see all of the stakeholders in this transaction, including yourselves, the public. There's a number of people that have interest in the system. So we try to make sure when questions come in, that we look at them in a way that not just answers the question and gets them out of the way, but we try to put some thought into the answers, and that sometimes takes the input of a number of people up here at the table. So we understand that's a little unusual, but we like to say that we appreciate your patience with that process. To some degree, we will continue that going forward, and we are going to establish a specific email address for the press to send questions that, as opposed to coming to me and then me having to distribute it to our answer group, will go directly to our answer group and we'll be able to turn answers around very quickly. So we understand that your business is made on having quick responses to questions, and we're going to do our best to provide that type of solution. In looking at the questions that we received by email, here's just a couple of examples, and then we're going to go through one particular question in detail that's been addressed or brought up in the press in the last week. There's been complaints that the meters have no lighting after sunset, so people can't really read what is on the meter, and if they're unfamiliar with it, they really don't know what to do. There's issues with people that want to park at a particular meter, say at 7:30 in the morning, before the actual meters start, and so they want to be able to go in and be able to pay, but have their time start at the appropriate time at 8 o'clock. There's been a number of complaints about aggressive enforcement on the meters. We will address that here tonight in more detail. Questions associated with enforcement on residential permits. Questions on holiday parking, which we understood and understand is a very serious issue. General questions about why the system rates are so high. And then also we have some questions from churches, several, but I want to clarify that these questions are bringing up new issues, not the issues that were brought up at this meeting last year. Just to go through one particular example on incorrect issuance of tickets, there were some press issuances last week that dealt with the fact that some people were being issued tickets when the time had not run out for what basically they had paid for. So we went back and looked at the information for January of this year. And for the metered system, just some data points that may be helpful, there were 60,000 parkers at the meters in the month of January. There were 5,358 tickets issued. There were 143 tickets dismissed by SP Plus due to either system errors or officer errors. That's 0.24% of the 60,000 parkers that were in the system, or 2.7% of the tickets issued. Now we realize in reading through that, if you're the party that gets a ticket that is basically been issued in error, you really don't care about the statistics. So what we want to do is, one, give a little perspective that while you, the person, might be unhappy, generally you shouldn't assume that SP Plus is not doing a good job. Does that mean that we should just let it lie and say that you have to deal with it? No. We're going to look at ways for continued improvement in 2015, which is the point that I brought up before. Chris Sherman had some information on particular data points associated with a comment in the press last week that tickets were issued incorrectly because of what's called a modem error. So I'll let him speak to this.
Yeah, and actually we take a look at all the data. John had mentioned there were 143 in error, and we can categorize those. One of those is the modem issue. So each of our units has a modem in it. And like any modem, at times it will stop working, it will go down, and typically it takes a reset. So what happens with the meter when it goes down is that our manager gets a text message that says, hey, we haven't heard from this particular meter. And at that point in time, our manager sends out a tech in order to fix the meter, and then also lets the parking enforcement officers know that you should not issue any violations in this area because the meter is not communicating. So basically that meter communicates all the license plates up to the internet, if you will, and that then when the officer comes by with a handheld unit and puts in the license plate number, if that modem didn't communicate, then it's not going to show up as a paid license plate number, and then they'll give a ticket in that case. So what we have looked at is how can we make this a more efficient process, and one of the ways that we're exploring is having that text message go directly to the enforcement officer as opposed to having to go to the manager and then be communicated again. Now, in the month of January, as John had mentioned, there were a total of 60,000 transactions that happened on the street. This particular issue occurred 33 times, which represents about 0.6 or about 0.5% of the violations in total. So there were about 5,358 there were 5,358 violations. 33 of those were due to that particular challenge. And John, one of the other items that we noticed as an issue was that a lot of patrons are having some challenges putting the license plate into the meter, and sometimes there's a transcribing error. We're also looking with the digital pay system to return your license plate to you on the screen so that you can verify that that's correct. That is one of the other, frankly, one of the bigger issues we have. One of the top ranking challenges we have is that the license plate is put in an error, and we think that through displaying it again on a digital machine, if we can get the technology to do that, that might help that issue too.
Thanks, Chris. So some of the items that we're looking at to improve performance, other than going through review of processes and procedures associated with the system, which Chris just mentioned. I know that they have personnel in from your meter group today discussing how you can deal with these problems. But also has come to our attention a very logical problem is that many people who want to pay tickets will go to the SP office, which is on Market? Walnut, excuse me. I'm from out of town, excuse me. And so when somebody's been issued a ticket, one, they have to pay for parking to go pay for a ticket. That's a problem. If they have to go pay for a ticket and the ticket's been issued incorrectly, that's even more of a problem. So we're going to put in place a program where we're going to have free ticket validation at the Walnut Street Garage for those that are going to go to the SP office and pay a ticket. And then we're going to provide some type of additional consideration for those that have been issued a ticket in error, probably some type of validation for additional parking within the system. So we hope to have the nuts and bolts in place for that very soon. So again, looking to some additional items that we're going to try to put in place in 2015 for an improved level of service is one, to look at a pilot at the River Street Garage for reduced rates at lunch, 5 to 7 during the weekdays, and then on Saturday. We're also on enforcement going to basically look at increased customer service through an ambassador program. We're going to train enforcement officers to be better ambassadors for the city of Harrisburg. We're going to look at a pilot for a small grace period on the meters, and also, as I mentioned before, free parking at Walnut if you're paying a ticket. Chris, you had some observations on the ambassador program and how it's been used in other systems. Can you share that with us?
Certainly. So in many of the operations, we have trained our parking enforcement officers as ambassadors, which we had done at the beginning of the operation here in Harrisburg. But as John had mentioned, there have been a number of changes, and we are going to do a refresher course, and especially with our new parking enforcement officers. Included in that is really a training on what is in the city and how those enforcement officers and ambassadors can help people with the meters, how they can help them find things in the city. And so we'll provide each of the ambassadors with a card that on one side gives instructions on how to utilize the meters, and then on the other side has basic information about destinations within the city.
Thank you. So looking at customer service, we'll look at the ambassador program. We also feel like there's additional attributes with Pango that can be issued, and we're going to be talking with them in the coming months about how we can better communicate how Pango works to people within the Harrisburg area. Certainly the ambassadors, if they're able to communicate with the public on how Pango works, how digital meters work as far as text messages when the time's getting ready to run out, that's going to be helpful to everyone. break at this point. I'm sorry, I skipped something in the agenda. Before we get into some conclusions on the meter data, we had Steve Goldfield come, who was going to talk about how the parking system has brought advantages to the city of Harrisburg. I'd like to turn it over to Steve at this point.
Steve Goldfield. Thanks for allowing me to come before the advisory committee. My name is Steve Goldfield, and I was the financial advisor to the receiver for the city of Harrisburg. Just about 14 months ago, the financial survival of the city was actually at stake. And I want to give some context and talk a little bit about 2013, a little bit about 2014, and then looking forward to 2015 as to this very complicated transaction, why it was done. The debt burden on the city at the time was unsustainable. You can see by the graphic here, the city had around $600 million worth of debt. That's more than 10 times the budget of the city of Harrisburg, and the city wasn't able to pay a fair amount of its debt service. And the city was at a place where they were already downsizing. They would probably have had to lay off scores of police, fire, non-uniform workers. Instead, the mayor, to his credit, was able to add a few positions last year, not as many as he would have liked, and not as many as city council probably would have liked as well. And this year, they're going to be able to add more. The annual debt burden would have been about 40% of the entire budget, so you could see that would have squeezed out the ability to do, the basic services that are required in the city. The city law department would have been spending an overwhelming majority of its time fending off creditors, trying to figure out how to get health insurance for employees. You could look at some of the bankruptcies, and we followed the same kind of path that some of the bankruptcies followed. The pensioners were whacked. There was incredible amounts of layoffs, and taxes were increased a lot more than they were in the city. So the construct of this parking transaction wasn't something we just thought the city would like, this city would need. The parking transaction came out of the dire straits that the city was in at the time. And the goal was to give the city an opportunity to succeed. That was our goal in putting this together. So how did the parking transaction help the city in 2014? I don't think you can overstate how much the parking transaction has helped the city of Harrisburg. The parking transaction itself paid off about $128 million of the debt that you see here. You can see by this graphic, this is the debt before the parking transaction. This is the debt that the city has after the transaction. It's a pretty stark contrast, and the parking transaction generated about $128 million towards the resource recovery facility debt and other obligations. It paid all the parking debt back. There was about $100 million of general obligation guaranteed parking bonds, and that was all paid back. The two of the parking transactions were really for other purposes than parking. One was for Harrisburg University. One was actually a borrowing that helped the city just get by with its operations one year. That was taking about $1.6 million a year out of the parking system that the city would have otherwise received. So the other thing that the parking transaction did was it generated $36 million that went directly to the city. The $36 million is used for a variety of purposes. Some was used to pay some of the debt back that hadn't been paid in years, but $26 million is put aside for economic development, infrastructure, and healthcare costs. So Impact Harrisburg was created last year. The members were appointed this year. They had their first meeting about a week ago, and there's money set aside for economic development, infrastructure, and other post-employment benefits. This is something that you don't see in a lot of the bankruptcies and other transactions across the country, but we thought it was essential for the city's recovery to be able to at least seed some economic development, improve the infrastructure. Probably the most important thing from my standpoint as a financial advisor shifts to this chart, which is that a lot of the bankruptcies and the debt restructurings took care of the debt, but didn't create ongoing revenues for the municipality. The parking transaction was conceived with a goal of generating around $3 million more per year, every year, growing as the city's budget grows. As you can see by this chart, there was a time when the parking system generated a lot of money for the city, $4 or $5 million a year. The parking authority actually did a great job. Again, we didn't do this because there was anything wrong with the parking authority or the job they were doing. What was happening was, as you can see by this graphic, the amount of money that was coming out of the parking system to the city was being cannibalized by other uses. And so by paying off the parking debt, we were able to free that money up. And so at the low point, the city was getting about $250,000 a year to the general fund from Harrisburg Parking Authority and the taxes. We're happy to say that we were able to release all of that debt, and the city got about $3 million more in 2014 than it received in 2013 from the parking. So the benefactor of this parking construct was intended to be and is the city of Harrisburg. A lot of credit belongs to the mayor, to the city council, to the administration for how they got through this year. It was an incredible year. That they faced significant changes and significant challenges and came out of 2014 with a surplus. The parking transaction was important, but prudent management of finances is what's going to make this city flourish in the future, and is extremely important, and kudos to the city for how 2014 went. So we know that the people in Harrisburg would prefer not to have meter hours from 5 to 7. That's been made really clear, and we also know that the people in Harrisburg would prefer not to have Saturday meters. There's a lot of smart people at the table and around the room. There's a lot of creative people at the table and in the room, and there's a lot of ways where those issues can be addressed, and I think they're going to start to be addressed in 2015. It wasn't the case that we could either have this or not this. What we had a choice of is a financial disaster, which we believe would have been much, much, much worse, or this. And now what there is to do, I think, is for the professionals on this team, the community, the leaders, to get together and to try to figure out a better way to implement this parking transaction over the next couple of years. To close, I just want to say that the other important thing to recognize with the parking transaction was that this was a way to kind of democratize some of the costs that the city would have otherwise borne. I'm a prime example, and I come from out of town, and every time I park in a garage in the city of Harrisburg, 20% goes to the city. When I park on the street, the cash flow is that we're trying to generate an extra $3 million for the city of Harrisburg. So instead of more earned income taxes and more real estate taxes imposed on the folks in the city of Harrisburg, a lot of the cash flow from taxes and from the waterfall are coming from people who live outside of the city of Harrisburg. And I am also a person who really thinks that the system has improved. I am able to pull right up in front of merchants, which I didn't before. A lot of times I'd pass up on stopping because people would leave their cars in front of places, and I didn't have time. And I can pull in front of any place I want to go now. And I haven't gotten a ticket in 2014 because I used the phone, I put my phone number in, and it texts me when I have 15 minutes left, and I type in 15, I text it back, and I get an extra 15 minutes. And it's worked really well. So I do want to say that they're having some glitches. It's not a panacea, but I think that it's going to get better and better, and I'm really hopeful that people can be cooperative and creative. And next year, when we're all together, we'll probably still have some issues, but hopefully we'll have addressed many of the ones that have come up today.
Thanks, Steve. Next, we'll just have a short comment on some meter information. For those of you that are familiar with Pango, Pango has had 4,000 transactions since they started in operation at the beginning of December in 2014. Digital meters, text option, there were 1,800 text options used in the month of January to extend time, such as Steve mentioned. However, there are some issues that we feel like the public can do a better job of in working with the operation of the meters. Nancy Kime has a couple of pointers that may help you make sure that you're making your input right and doing everything correct.
Thanks, John. I think these are 3 good points here. In January, 140 patrons entered an incorrect license plate, which then we usually give a violation to. Be sure when you're entering your license plate that you enter all the characters and double check it. Make sure that you entered it correctly. If you receive a text message, you must respond to that text message before your meter expires. You can't extend if your meter is expired. So make sure you do that before the meter expires. And one last note, if a meter is malfunctioning, please just go to the next meter that you can use. The system is pay by license plate, not pay by space. So there are 3 good tips that can help you avoid getting a violation.
Thanks, Nancy. Now we'll move on to public comments. I just want to make a short statement, look back at our meeting in February of last year, and just look at some of the general comments that we had at that point in time. Some of the primary comments that we had were from churches who were concerned about expanded hours, rates, effect on their services, events, volunteer events, and we'll note that after that meeting that Nancy and her staff and Rick also met with a number of churches, and as Nancy mentioned, have established programs with the majority of the churches here dealing with reduced rates for their services and events. So we feel like that issue has been dealt with relatively successfully. Also, there were a number of concerned comments over expanded hours and rates. As Steve has mentioned, we understand some of the key points in the 5 to 7 area and Saturday, and we're looking at ways that we can address those this year and try to provide some relief to those that are parking in the system in those hours. Now we'd like to open up to public comments. What I'd like to do is start in the rear left and go from left to right, please. So if you can just nod whether you want to make a comment or not, and then pass along and feel free to come up and speak. And we hope that you can get your point across and be fairly brief so we can have a number of people that can give comments.
Good evening. My name is Alan Kennedy Schaefer. I live at 252 Burbeck Street. And some of you may have read, I am running for City Council as a team with Destiny Hodges. I'm here tonight because I've been knocking on the doors, getting signatures from my neighbors, residents throughout the city, and I keep hearing over and over that something has to be done about parking in the city. Too many people are getting erroneous tickets. 3% is the number you put out. I'm not sure I'm not sure how accurate that is, but even 3% is too high. If there was a business that had a 3% error rate, I'm sure that business would do more than simply give people more of the product that was defective in the first place. Second, we're driving businesses to the West Shore. We're driving businesses east toward Linglestown, toward Hershey. We need to do more to promote our downtown, our midtown, our business district businesses. We should look and see how the parking rate increases and the lengthening of hours has affected the, for instance, happy hour. 5 to 7 p.m. used to be prime opportunity for the downtown to capture the income of state workers, of city workers, of all of the lobbyists and accountants and lawyers who are affiliated with the capital of Pennsylvania. Now 5 to 7 p.m. is a ghost town on 2nd Street. I would also I've heard a lot of criticism of Saturdays. Everyone knows that parking in Harrisburg used to be, you only had to pay when you went out from Monday through Friday. Now, unlike a lot of cities, we charge for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Only Sunday is the exception. That should be looked at seriously to see how that's affecting our businesses. I would also wanted to mention that if someone is paying $3 an hour, which for everyone here who travels to Philadelphia knows that $3 an hour is more than you pay in downtown Philadelphia. $3 an hour, that's an added, that's money that you're taking off of the downtown business's income. Every $3 an hour that they pay or $30 fine that they pay is money that they're not paying at the restaurants, at the hotels, at the mom and pop shops, at the hardware stores to support our city's economy. As you mentioned, you're from out of town. We need people who are from town. We need people who understand our businesses to look out for our city's future. Finally, I wanted to mention that I hope that this body will do more than simply offer an email address to solicit public input. We need an opportunity to come and comment. There should have been agendas available to the public. I had no idea when the public comment period was because there's no agenda at the front door. That's unacceptable. The community needs to be part of this process. I understand I understand that Standard Parking has told the mayor in the past that there's nothing that can be done due to the contract. That's unacceptable. And I hope that we are going to find solutions that work for our businesses, our residents, and our city. Thank you.
So again, if we can stop at the back left, start at the back left.
Hi folks, thanks for being here. My name is Jason Klein, and I was the one who got that ticket in Bermondsey. Okay? You said that 143 times that there's been an issue that tickets have been dismissed. Now, if we as a consumer don't have the receipt, there is no way for anybody to fight it. There is no way. Because if you don't have that receipt proving that you paid that time, how are they going to prove or disprove when they put their money in? Okay, and if you have modem glitches, all modems are going to have glitches. You have to figure out a better way to send that information or put a light on top of the meter saying that there's an issue with your system. Okay? All technology has issues. You got to figure out a better way of using technology or whatever, and that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you for the floor. My name is Eric Palmer. I'm a resident of Shinehook in Harrisburg. I was originally referred to this committee because I have a zoning issue for residential parking. But I realized that it's related to the business at hand because the rates have actually forced me to consider moving out of Harrisburg, and I think that's really sad. There is insignificant parking in the small neighborhood in which I live. There's some residential, there's an empty space that could actually be used for parking reference to the city now. However, now that rates have gone to $30 a ticket at an average of one a month, which was acceptable prior, I'm now looking at $400 a year to afford that. So I'd like for there to be found a better way to consider the rates, and the residents of Harrisburg who want to stay in a smaller city, this is not Philadelphia, and consider that although this is a capital city in the Commonwealth of this country, that residents of a smaller community should be treated a little bit differently.
Hi, my name is Ben Hallett. I'm actually a member of Harrisburg City Council. And the number one issue that people talk to me, whether they're a resident or a visitor or a small business owner, is parking. So I just felt very strongly that I think it's something that I felt compelled to come tonight and share just a little bit. From a residential standpoint, you've heard it already tonight, the impact is real. I mean, the residents of our city have already been faced with a lot on their burden, and parking is just one added thing onto that. From a small business perspective, I've had several small business owners approach me and say that they will leave the city if nothing is changed when it comes to parking. And from my perspective, we can't afford to lose one business in the city of Harrisburg right now, and I think that's something that we need to take very seriously. I like the fact that you talked about discount and you're considering it. You got to move beyond that and do something now. We're getting ready to enter the spring season in our downtown. Harrisburg is usually booming when the weather gets a little bit warmer. I don't want anything to inhibit that happening, this spring. Lastly, I think that unfortunately, and this has nothing to do with politics, this is about economics. I'm used to having to deal with a PR machine and people thinking negative things about the city. That's something that we, as elected officials, encounter on a regular basis. However, for you all, I think you have been behind the scene when it comes to being able to respond to the complaints and the needs of the community. And I think you need to do a better job of responding and listening. And not offering what I would say is excuses, but solutions moving forward. That's something that we need to see. There's a lot of people here tonight. I thought there might be more people here tonight, because I know that this is the #1 hot topic. And unfortunately, as a member of City Council, I have not had anything that I can say or do to alleviate their concerns, and that is something that is up to this body here. So I sit here using my role as City Council to say, you have to do something, and you have to do something quickly. And I do think, from an economic standpoint, that if you did offer discounts, you would see a greater volume. If you did offer reduced rates during times, you would see a greater usage. And I think that would go up. Right now, as many people say, a number of restaurants in downtown Harrisburg have said in the last year they had a significant business impact, and they can only equate it to parking. That's the only constant thing that they can look at. And I think that that's something that's significant, and I think we need to take that into strong consideration. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bernie Pupo. I live on the 900 block of 2nd Street. I've lived there for 24 years. I have a salon on the side of my property, which is also a driveway that goes up to my salon. Over the years, I've had a very good business. My business is declining now. I think part of it is because of the parking. I have a lot of older clients that come, and I've told them that they could park at the driveway because some of them are handicapped, walkers and things like that. And in years past, people the city meter people would come by, and if they looked in and saw me working and I was working on someone, they would make a motion, is this my client's car? And I would say yes, and they would go on by because they would park across the driveway. My recent experience was on the 5th of December, which I have been doing for 24 years, going out and running errands, coming home, and I would pull in front of my driveway because I now have a truck and I can't pull it into my driveway. But I would stop, I would unpack my packages, my groceries and things like that, And on the 5th, I did the same thing that I've been doing for 24 years. And when I came back out, there was a ticket on my car, my truck. And I turned to the person who put the ticket there and said, "Excuse me, what is the problem here?" And he said, "Your meter's expired." I said, "This is not a metered spot. This is my driveway." And he said, "Well, it doesn't make any difference if you're on the street, you get a ticket." So I tried talking to the standard parking, because this man told me he couldn't do anything for me. I talked to standard parking. They told me that as long as I'm parked on the street and I don't have money in the meter, I will get a ticket. Now my clients who are handicapped and unable to walk long distances, they started getting tickets. So now they have to put money in the meters. Some of them can't even walk down the street to go to those meters. And I just think that it's a shame because, like I said, when Harrisburg took care of the parking meters and somebody would walk by and they would make a motion, that was a nice gesture to me that they wouldn't give a person who's handicapped a ticket because that's where they had to park. In the very beginning, standard parking did the same thing. When they were walking the streets, they would stop and they would motion to me about the car and I would say yes and they would go right on by. It's only been since they do this thing with from the car that all my clients have been getting tickets. And like I said, it's affecting my business.
Hi, my name is Matt Sterndale. I live on 115 North Street, which is Grateful Apartments. And you know, all this is all well and good, and you're speaking about the parking and everything, but the people you're targeting are actually the residents of Harrisburg. I used to live in Midtown, didn't have to pay for parking, didn't have to worry about it. Then I moved downtown to be closer to northern restaurants and things, and I've gotten more tickets in the past few weeks than I can count. It's everything. It's street cleaning. It's, you know, I work 8 to 4:30. I try and find a place to park. I get a ticket because it's not after 7 o'clock tonight. I have to pull into a spot and I have to wait till after 7 o'clock to move my car to State Street because tomorrow morning is every other Wednesday street cleaning day. Tomorrow around 8 o'clock in the morning when you go to see if the street's actually been cleaned, it's not. So there's people that move. Streets don't get cleaned, or there's people who stay, then they get the whole street is covered in tickets. I have pictures proving a lot of this, and which will then go to court with me when I fight my $300 or whatever is in tickets. So for example, here's a map I was given by Harrisburg City when I first moved downtown that gives you all the options of where to park. Namely 700, 800 block North 2nd Street. This says 700, 800 block North 2nd Street, you may park at only the meters listed S713, S715, S717. Here's pictures of the so-called meters that do not exist, that are not there. If you park anywhere a little bit further away from those 3 residential spots that are supposed to be for the residents, you get tickets. The street is constantly lined with tickets. There's no signage, there's no nothing. I would say that out of the 5,000 some people that were ticketed last year, probably 4,000 of them are residents of the city. The timing of everything is absolutely horrible. To actually somebody who wants to come visit and has to visit and wants to visit this city, in order for me to get them a permit to park, they either that or they come on Saturday to pay $3 an hour for the day, or I have to drive and instead of paying an hour on 2nd Street and trying to find a place to park on my lunch break, I park on Logan Street. I walk to the Martin Luther King Jr. building. I walk up to the 2nd floor. I tell them I want to get a permit for a couple days, walk back downstairs to the treasurer's office, pay the treasurer's office, go back upstairs, get the permit, go back out to my car on Logan Street, and hopefully get a sandwich on my way back to work, which is across the river where I should have moved in the first place when I moved here from out of town to work. Thank you.
My name is Bob Byers. I live in Midtown and I work in the Capitol Complex. As part of a customer service aspect of this, I think tonight's meeting could have been at 7 o'clock instead of 6 o'clock, and I would not have had to pay to park.
Mr. Lambert, I'm a parent of a student that attends SciTech, and I'd just like to make a recommendation that you make some special accommodations for the parking meters that are in front of the school. If my daughter is sick and I need to run into school to get her, I shouldn't have to park someplace else, walk over to the school, get her out. She's ill, walk her back there and have them validate my parking. I should be able to park in front of the school and run in and get my kid instead of paying $3 for an hour because it's going to take me a little bit to get her schoolwork and get everything done, and take her out, and she's sick. I think that there should be some accommodations made for parents who have children that attend a school downtown not to have to pay for parking when they need to go to school. That's it. Thank you.
Are you ready for the questions?
Good evening. I'm Walter David Prediger. I'm a deacon at Salem United Church of Christ, which is right on the same street at Chestnut Street. It's the old church that started in 1787. I was here last year. My big problem is, a week ago, we had a funeral for an 88-year-old man who had been going to this church most of his life. We were trying to set up a funeral for him, but we didn't want these elderly people all to get tickets. So we had to go 50 miles out of our way, and we went up to Mount Holly Springs to have the service. The next thing on my mind is, as a church, we try to serve the people of Harrisburg. We have a clothing giveaway on the 7th. So this coming Saturday from 10 to noon at the church, and we don't charge anything. We try to keep it real nice. We have good clothes, good quality stuff, but give these people an edge. Now, why can't you all give us a break and let us have some type of flag or something, like when we have a funeral that you can put on the car and give a specified time to have that funeral and have it free, no charge? And why couldn't you do the same thing with the clothing giveaway? Because these people don't have any extra money. So that's all I have to say.
Good evening, my name is Jason Moffitt, and I know you answer questions by committee, but I may ask some pretty easy questions that you might be able to say yes or no to right now. So one, I received a ticket, and being responsible, I wanted to pay my ticket. And by reading the ticket, I assume that you accept U.S. currency. Is that correct? Can someone say yes?
I think we'll need to listen to your question.
Okay. So
we don't want to go through.
I'm in America, so I took U.S. currency down to your office to pay my ticket, and they refused to take my money. And I was told I needed to either go pay online or write a check, and if I didn't, I would receive a notice, which I received yesterday, of a delinquent violation. So I took $30 in U.S. currency 2 days after I received my ticket, and I was refused by Mr. Simmons, sitting right here, who would not take my money. I asked to talk to Mrs. Kime, and she was not available. U.S. currency, regardless of what denomination that currency is in, it's U.S. currency. He did not want to count my money, okay? So I took him $30 in pennies and nickels. That is U.S. currency, regardless, it's $30. He refused my money. Now you're asking me to pay $50 because my fine is delinquent when I made it there in time enough to pay it before it was delinquent. So if I gave him 31s, he would count those, correct? To make sure it was the right amount. He asked me to take my money and go to the bank and bring back dollars. No, I brought you $30. $30 in U.S. currency. Why was my cash refused? That's my question.
We'll consider your question.
No one can answer that? What's your payment policy then?
Well,
is there a policy on how you can pay your money, or you just want my money the way you want my money?
We'll consider your question.
Thank you. Ask your committee for some answers. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Ann Miller, and I represent the Grayco Apartments and River's Edge Apartments on the north end of town. I was going to kind of stay quiet during this session and just see it's the number one topic of every resident that comes into town, whether they're local or from out of town. They know there's a parking problem. Last year I predicted that I would lose at least 12 leases. I lost 16. 8 of those went to the West Shore. They talk constantly about, if I get out of work at this hour, then I'm going to go to the West Shore, spend 2 hours, spend my money, come back. And I think that's what the problem is. When I leave my work at 7 o'clock, I can see all the way up to the Crown Plaza to pull out, and at 7:05, they're back. So they are going somewhere. I also want to say thank you, because I think your ambassadors, working with your parking people, have made great strides to try and work with us. I see a little bit of that. I have 3 spaces outside my building that are not metered, they're only loading and unloading. But if somebody wants to come see my property, and I am selling the city, I'm selling your businesses, I'm selling the mayor, I'm selling to keep the tax dollars here, I just think that these 3 spaces, I have 15 minutes to grab their hand, run upstairs, show them everything I have, interview them, see if they're qualified, and get them back down so they don't have a ticket. So, I don't know how many, last year I asked how many spaces, how many tickets were, or parking permits were actually sold for our 300 spaces, which I think might be 77 short. And it's very difficult. I don't know how to answer this question anymore, because the people coming in will say, I don't have anywhere to park, or I can't afford the tickets. And I don't know how to address that, but I appreciate you moving forward. I appreciate you looking at Saturdays. That's just incredibly hard for residents, and those 3 hours are costing everybody money, because they are going to the West Shore, and on the West Shore they're like, there's an apartment complex and I don't have to pay to park, and look at this restaurant, and we don't want them going that way. They came this way in 2003, 2004, 2005. We're starting to see them trickle back or buy something where they don't have to deal with the parking. So I appreciate your consideration. Consider that I have 300 residents on the north end of town. There isn't a parking problem, it's just we're not allowed to park anywhere. So please keep these residents, these are people who are running your restaurants and running your government, and they can't afford to add these tickets, one on top of the other. A girl left because she had like a deck of cards because she can't come home after work and park. But thank you for your time, and please consider my residents down there, so that they can keep coming to your restaurants and utilizing downtown, because it should not be a city that closes, and it's on the border. Thank you.
My name is Josh Lewis. I work at a restaurant downtown, and the owner and the other people who work there wanted me to come and at least say something. The business in the past year has declined tremendously. When we run into our regular customers, or when they do come in once in a while, they say, parking. We used to have a lot of people come in at 5 and 6 o'clock to eat. Our restaurant is almost empty now until 7 p.m. And we get a few tables at 7 if we're lucky. And it's just ridiculous. The restaurant has been there for a number of years. It's been a very good restaurant, and the past year it's just declined tremendously. And the only thing we can come up with is the parking. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Well, pardon me. We will follow up and organize these questions along with the ones that we received by email and post those to the website. As I said in the beginning, this is going to be a year for improvement. And as some of you have brought up tonight, there's serious areas where you want improvement in the parking system. We understand that. The ball is in our court. We have to perform. So that's how I'm going to close the meeting tonight, and I hope that we can come out with announcements in the next couple of weeks that will address some of the issues we have and that you have, and then continue to make improvements over the year. So we appreciate you coming out tonight. We appreciate your input. We're going to do our best to try to make this parking system meet both our needs and your needs going forward. Thank you very much.